will just know. Welcome to Even the Dog Has ADHD, because apples don't fall far from trees and it's never just one. I'm really thrilled to have my lovely friend Hayley here with us today. Hayley is going to be sharing her story about her birth family. She is number 4 in a family of 6 children. Hayley, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Why don't we start off with your journey from where you are natively to where you are now?
Sure, yeah. So currently I'm in Oxford, England, but I was not from here. So I grew up on a farm in Ohio in the USA. I describe it to a lot of people as sort of like growing up in the 100-acre woods. I was given a lot of freedom, a lot of creativity, and we were allowed to run around outside. So, yeah, it was a really lovely upbringing. And we kind of lived in a really nice pocket in an oasis where I was from. So what brought me to the UK? Let's see. My original degrees, so my undergrad, I really wanted to combine science and art. So I actually did a double major in biology and studio art. And while I was there, people would always ask, "Oh, do you want to illustrate textbooks when you graduate?" And I would say, "Yeah, that sounds great. That's exactly what I want to do." But I never really put those two things together, even after I graduated. I did a lot of Mod Podge, different jobs, worked for quite a while, and then decided I did want to go back and get my master's, and I wanted to do
Mhm.
that in medical illustrating. So actually, I ended up doing my master's in Glasgow, of all places, up in Scotland. I loved it. I loved Scotland. It was absolutely great. And yeah, and then I got a job in Oxford, and now I live in a beautiful place right along the river. It's absolutely lovely.
Tell me a little bit about when you were on your journey in terms of the learning disability, that discovery and how that happened for you.
Sure. So when I was in school, and this would have been the equivalent of high school for the USA. So before uni, before A levels, in that kind of space and time, I started to really notice that I had to study a lot longer and a lot harder than a lot of my friends to get the same levels. By no means was I struggling. So I had a 4.0, which is a straight A student. That's kind of the highest you can get. And so I went to my guidance counselor at the time and said, "Hey, I just don't think this is right. Like, I think something's wrong because I shouldn't be doing this in comparison to the people that I'm with." And he said, "Oh, no, 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 you're fine. You're clearly doing fine. You have great grades." So, with that being said, then, I did end up going on to my undergrad, and I really, really struggled at that point. That's when, yeah, you kind of find out at that point, ooh, you can't really get by when you're already studying as much as you can, or you're already putting so much time and effort into your school. Yeah, having a learning disability that's undiagnosed is not the easiest. So I had talked at that point to my mom because my younger brother also has a learning disability, and I
Mhm.
knew at the time that he really needed to get tested. He really would have struggled, and so I could get by. Some of me thinks that's because I was a woman, but we tend to get by with more. But I really wanted my mom to get my baby brother diagnosed, and so he was diagnosed a lot younger and had a lot of support throughout high school and help there. But I was never diagnosed until my sophomore year, so my second end of my second year of uni. I at that point was just really stressed, and I just needed some extra help. So I went and got officially tested for this. The really interesting part is that I was so much older at the time. They didn't have an actual test for my age. So the woman who did the testing had to kind of manipulate some of the tests that she had for younger students. And she said, "You're the oldest person that I've ever tested." So I got tested very late, but I got it nonetheless. And after that, it was confirmed that I had a reading, writing, learning disability. And so in my university, that was really great. They gave me extra time on exams and tests. And they actually, at the time, because we didn't have a ton of things available, they would tell me to buy my books, my textbooks. I would take them to the office that did this. They would unbind the books. They would send the books through a scanning system. The scan would then be transferred into a read out loud version of the books, which
Wow.
is, yeah. And nowadays, they have a pen that you can even just rub across the text and it does text to speech. Or now you can take pictures with your phone on different apps. We've come leaps and bounds. It's absolutely wonderful. I'm really glad about that. But yeah, and the e-readers were terrible when I first started. So they just sounded really computerized and didn't understand sentence cadence. So they sounded very jotty. It was really, yeah. I don't know how much help that actually was, but the time and just having someone acknowledge that I did have this learning
Yeah.
disability was really helpful.
Now, the learning disability, was there a name for it? Because it's not dyslexia that you were diagnosed with, was it?
No, so I think that's a common phrase. People almost always say, "Oh, you have a learning disability." Oh, it's dyslexia,
Yeah.
which is a type of learning disability, but that doesn't cover absolutely everything. And when I was diagnosed, and bear in mind this was over a decade ago, they didn't have an exact term for what my disability was called. I'm sure today they probably do. It's probably, has a perfect little name. But at the time, it was just the categories that the learning disability kind of displayed in. So mine was a reading, writing, learning disability.
Now, let's go to your brother that you really advocated for with him. So I know when we first spoke about ADHD, you said, "Oh, yep, we've got it in my family."
You do.
And I think you may, as we've gone on and as we'll go on, I'm sure more will be unpacked. But do you want to talk about your little brother a bit more and that what you advocated for educational support for him and what was his diagnosis?
Yeah, so again, he also had a learning disability. He struggled a lot in school, even really young, so elementary school. He just didn't really love school, I think is the biggest thing. And so if you have a learning disability and you're struggling in school, having school be enjoyable, it just doesn't really fit. You're not going to enjoy something that's just a constant struggle and a battle. So yeah, I think I often took him under my wing a bit. So we have almost a 4-year age gap, and he was, the baby. So everybody wants to kind of love on the baby. And we were always really tight. So I kind of took on some of like a mothering role with him a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing was I just didn't want to see him struggle knowing that I also had struggled with this. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I really advocated that he would get tested early because I knew if anything, it would just give him some extra support in school. So, yeah.
And what was his diagnosis then?
I don't know if he had specifically, if he was specifically diagnosed with dyslexia. But again, it was still quite similar. It is genetic. So it was, again, a reading, writing, learning disability. And yeah, I would say probably also, it probably comes down the line. So I think my dad also has dyslexia. He might have dyslexia. And so it kind of comes from there. But to different degrees even, which is really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So I would say, within my family, I think my sister and another brother would say, well, yeah, we might have a little bit of it, but theirs wasn't to the degree that myself and my younger brother had.
You've mentioned your dad and you've mentioned your mum.
Mhm.
briefly.
Yeah.
So, do you want to share a little bit about your mum's journey
Yeah,
and
so
as
yeah,
her
my mom.
daughter? You've got some lovely stories.
Yeah, I do. I've got loads. Yeah. So my mom, um, she was diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago. She is turning 70 this year. So she was diagnosed at 68. So she's one of those cases that have been recently coming out of, oh my gosh, I've lived my whole life and I didn't know why I was this way. And now I have reasons. And now I have, I kept sending her things on Instagram, stories about ADHD and lots of different things. And she even said, they used to make her cry because she finally felt seen after all this time. And, just kind of thinking, oh, I'm not lazy. That was never it. So yeah, so it's been a really interesting journey, kind of for my mom recently going through that, finding out all of this about herself. Um, I think some of us, myself mainly, knew that she had ADHD when I was quite young. So I think I was a teenager once when I really begged my mom, great teenager, always great to your parents. I just begged my mom to get medication. I thought, oh my gosh, she's so scattered. She definitely has ADHD. She needs medicated.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, oh gosh, what a great teenager. But also, I had lived with my mom. I knew what was going on. It was very clear to me as her daughter, like you need some extra help and support through this. So yeah, I
That's
tell people she did sort of self-medicate without realizing, because everybody develops coping mechanisms and everybody
mm,
develops their own way of dealing. And I remember her drinking so many pots of coffee that was calming, like it was doing the opposite of what coffee does for most people. So it wasn't stimulating her, it was sort of bringing her down. Yeah, and I just always assumed, oh, that's crazy. Like all that coffee has got to be amping her up, but really she was medicating herself and it was kind of bringing her down. Yeah.
so so that's quite a big thing for a teenager to say, Mum, I really need you to think about a diagnosis because something wasn't right for you as a teenager.
Yeah.
I can think of that fun snow story.
Oh yeah, that is a great story. Yeah, so the great thing about having a mom with ADHD is it was extremely, like I said, it was creative. We were allowed to explore and we were really encouraged to do a lot of creative things. Um, it was like having a big sister or like a really fun person there to do these things and excite you about stuff. The story that I had shared about the snow was, my mom woke us up in the middle of the night one night, and it was a school night. And it was because it was snowing, and we all had to get up, and we put on our snow gear, and we all went running outside, and we played in the snow, and how fun it was, and how exciting that was. But then we had to get up for school the next day, which was really hard. And we were all tired and exhausted because we didn't get the snow day we thought we were going to get. And so we had to go to school. Um, so, in some ways, the parental role or the responsible role that generally the adult would play or the parent would play, we didn't always have that. So, we had a lot of creativity and a lot of fun. And that was really great. But sometimes it was a struggle because you kind of needed, as a kid, to have that parent there who would say, "Yes, I will make your doctor appointment for you," and the parent would remember. Instead, a lot of times the kid would have, "Okay, mom, like we need to take this into consideration, or we need to do this now. This is the time." So, in that sense, I think by the time I was a teenager and probably quite sassy, that's when it kind of came to a head of, I need this from you, and I don't have the words to really express what I need from my mom, but I wanted that and needed that from her. And so, yeah, that's when things kind of came to a head of get medicated. Yeah.
where was it in your journey from sort of teen to young adult that you had that moment where you were like, I've got this resentment to my mum and I'm going to forgive her for it?
Hmm.
And it was complete news to her. And what was that like for you? That kind of epiphany that there had been that resentment, that you wanted that connection.
Yeah. I hmm. I think honestly, yeah, as you know, as we grow and we mature, hopefully, as adults, and you kind of you recognize different roles of your parents. You know, when you're young, you think they're basically superheroes and they can do no wrong, or you just think they're this untouchable thing. And then as you age, you realize, oh, they're real people too, and they have real lives and real struggles, and they also have things that they have to go through. So as I matured and kind of got to those points in my life, it was
Mm.
easy then to look back and see that a lot of the things that my mom did, it wasn't to spite me, and it wasn't to because she was neglectful in any way. It was because, oh, she's coping with this very real thing, and that's been limiting her and her ability to do some of the things that for other people might be really easy or might be really normal. And so it wasn't because she was a bad mom. It was simply because she was undiagnosed ADHD and she wasn't capable of doing some of these things. Bear in mind, she had 5 kids. I just think, whew, like, oh my gosh, I can't
And
imagine
you were weren't
one.
you quite close? There was 4 years between you and your younger brother, and then going up, how
Yeah,
many years?
so yeah, we have a 10-year span. So we for a decade, that was the kids. Between the eldest and the youngest, there's a 10-year gap. And so there's three in the middle that are kind of closer together. So toot, toot, toot. And then there's a bit more room on either end. So 3 years and then 4 years. So yeah. So that's kind of the array of children, which is a lot. And then I have a half sister who was even so she was the eldest, and she would even come into the mix on summers when we were younger. So
Mm.
that's so many kids. That's
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
kids around, and just yeah, trying to maintain and handle all of that. She was a stay-at-home mom. She worked as a teacher for the first two children, and then after that, she decided to be a stay-at-home mom and dedicate herself to the kids. So yeah.
So you recognizing things in your mum, and you were essentially advocating for her as well in
Mhm.
her own journey to diagnosis, and that those sending those links and her feeling seen is really, it's really special, isn't it? And I kind of feel like it's never too late for a diagnosis,
No,
ever, is it?
ever. Mm-mm. No, and I think that's kind of the best part of a diagnosis, is it gives you, I don't know, some justification, if that's the right word, but my mom just felt so much relief from that, and it's really been good, I think, for her to feel that. She said she used to cry every single time that she saw these things because she just finally felt seen or heard.
Mm.
And now, she said now she's in a better, not a better place, but she's kind of accepted this. And she's sending things to some of her friends that she recognizes this in. And she's talking more about this in different spaces that she normally wouldn't have spoken to. So
That's
yeah, it's good. Yeah.
It's really amazing. Now, you have mentioned your younger brother. Your older brother, like you, got a diagnosis, didn't he, in
Yeah.
university? Do you want to
Yeah.
share a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think this is also maybe some of the reason that it wasn't crazy for me to say at the time, as a teenager, Mom, you need to get medicated for ADHD, because mental health was something that, while we didn't always talk about it because it was still, oh, it's mental health, we did talk about it probably more than most families, because I had a brother. So my eldest brother has Asperger's, and he was diagnosed basically when he went to uni. So I think he was 19 or 18 or 19 when he was diagnosed. But obviously he had always had Asperger's. It wasn't like it just appeared. So I had jokingly said, the story of like he could only have his peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day for lunch, for school. That was what he had, that you did not deviate. So there were lots of things like that. Or we used to say, oh, Brad's having an explosion. And it would sort of be him sort of letting out some of his emotions and feelings, and he would be pacing in a room. And so that's your normal, you're used to this, you just say, oh, that's him just being him, without really realizing, oh, that's actually probably something else going on there. And we had no clue or no idea. So yeah, so when he was diagnosed with Asperger's, and then he's also bipolar. So that was kind of another piece to the puzzle that came a lot later. So he wasn't diagnosed with bipolar until later on into his 20s. And kind of getting that diagnosis was also really helpful. And I think those kinds of diagnoses really keep people alive, I think, in a lot of ways, because they need that. And that medication can be life-saving. So so with that kind of conversation, and those things are something that we talked about often, because we had an elder brother who had that. So it was something that was a bit more common in my family.
He was at uni before you, so like you, he'd managed to cope with schooling, primary school, secondary school, and then it's a tipping point, isn't it, when you
Yes.
reach uni, because there's the independence from home as well. You don't have that home support,
Yes.
um, that infrastructure around you to be able to do that study, and that's definitely a time when it rears its head for a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
so with these diagnoses, how would you say that's impacted on your family relationships?
uh, that's a good question. I think
Mm.
in a lot of ways, I think it's almost given a space for conversations to happen. If I would hope that's the case. I know with myself and my mom, that's definitely been a lot better, because it's given some context to actions, or it's given some understanding to what's been, maybe something that, oh, I really needed that from you, mom, and I didn't know that you weren't able to give that to me. So it's been able to kind of piece together some of that. I think it also, not that it justifies things, but I think in some ways, when my dad would say, "Oh, I just wish," like he would just give me a hug and say hi, like a quote normal person, and to say, well, but he has Asperger's, and that's not something that he recognizes necessarily to do. Although you would never know. Sometimes I think my brother is such an amazing coper that he knows exactly what he's supposed to do in social situations. So he's gotten really, really good at that. And I think he's just coped so well in his life. So even though I always give him a hug and make him hug me anyway, and like, "Meh, you're gonna do this, and I don't care how it feels for you." But I think deep down, he also kind of appreciates it a bit, that, oh, my younger sister is teasing me. But I did have to teach him sarcasm at one point, or we went through a phase where we learned sarcasm together. And that was really, really fun, because he'd stop and look at me and think, are you being facetious? And I would say, I am. Okay, you got it. Which was just a lot of fun. Yeah, so it was good.
So the next generation is being born now, aren't they, Hayley? You've got
Mhm.
nieces, nephews. Remind me, is it?
Yes. Yes, so I have two nieces and two nephews. So three from one family and one from another.
And has there been any sort of recognition by you? Have you kind of seen any markers, having grown up in the family that you've grown up with?
Yeah,
Is there things that you may be seeing there that you recognize?
I think so. And it's not like we go looking, or we're trying to place labels on different kids. Really, I think most of this stuff really is genetic. And so you just, yeah, you kind of see it play out in different ways and to different degrees as well. But I think, yeah, one of my nieces, she's actually,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, she's smart as a tack. She's so great. But they did notice that she was kind of struggling a bit to connect with people in school, and maybe they were looking and maybe something's going on there, and they've actually put her in a really great program in the States called Brain Balance. Yeah, it's really interesting. It kind of helps just it's just another method for kind of exercising a kid's ability to kind of feel comfortable in different zones in different situations. And they've been noticing that it's really helped her. So I think because it's normal, or it's normalized a bit more in our family, in my family, it's really kind of then been able to say, oh yeah, like, let's just go down this route. Let's just, give as much help and support for the kid as we can now. And all it does is really help. It can't really hurt. So
Mm.
yeah, so I think that's been really great that we would open that up and support her when she was younger.
I want to ask you a couple of things. Like,
Hmm.
if somebody is, say, I'm listening to this and I'm really struggling in terms of resentment, say, towards my mum
Hmm.
because I felt really let down, I felt not seen, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I might be on my own journey with my own diagnosis or my kid's diagnosis. What would you say to me if that was me right now and we've been talking? What kind of encouragement would you give, do you think?
Yeah. I I mean, I definitely would say go at your own pace. Don't say I'm over it when really maybe you're not. Um, but I think the biggest thing is learn more about the diagnoses, learn more about ADHD, learn more about autism, because I do think, oh, knowledge is power. I know it sounds really silly,
Yeah.
but I do think that's really true. I think the more you know and learn things, it just explains the behaviors that you kind of see play out. Um, I jokingly, I have a really great friend. They have ADHD. I tend to be around a lot of people with ADHD because I feel comfortable around those people. I grew up with a mom who had it, so that's my normal. But my friend, I kept putting the keys where the keys go. And my friend kept asking, "Well, where are the keys?" And I was like, "They're right there. They're where the keys go." And we did this several times. And I think if you didn't realize, oh, that's something that's really difficult for someone with ADHD to know that this is where you place this and it's always going to be there and like that's the space, then it might be irritating or it might be agitating. And I think if you know some of these things, it helps you better understand why the person is behaving the way they are.
Hmm.
So learn more knowledge. Yeah.
Knowledge. And the kind of, I guess, final takeaway, I mean, in terms of your own journey and understanding, because, like, I mean, we've often chatted about this, counseling, kind of looking back and reflecting, coaching, looking forward, finding new strategies. Is
Mhm.
there anything like that that you found that has really helped you on your own journey of life, as it were?
Yeah. I I'm always a big person to say go to therapy. I think it's great. I think it gives you a perspective, outside your own head. I think that's really helpful. And because it's not a friend and it's not a family member, your friends are always going to be in your corner. They're always going to support you. Your family's always going to be biased because they're your family. So it's nice to just have someone outside of all of that who can kind of just look as an outside observer. And we have talked about this a bit. And I think therapy is great. The actions past that, though, sometimes I think that's where therapy sort of lacks. There's not always a second step, or like, what do I do with this information now that you've untangled me and pulled all my pieces out? what do I do now?
How do
And
I
so,
rebuild this?
right
Yeah.
now I have a mess. What am I supposed to do with a mess? Yeah. I so I think that's kind of the two-way street, is that, if you are talking to someone and you're unpacking some of these things from your past or from, all kinds of areas of your life,
Mhm.
then there's also needs to be some secondary step of, okay, now how do I work through this? What steps do I take to kind of to support my unpacking? So it's sort of
Yeah.
unpacking and repacking, I guess, a suitcase, and you just keep going back and forth. Yeah, so
I,
that's been most
yeah.
helpful, I think, for me.
I've heard a really lovely quote from this guy who he's a authenticity coach of some description. He
Ooh,
stopped branding himself as an authenticity coach, but something that I heard that was really helpful was you never stop healing. You never finally arrive. Life is a journey, and I found that really really impactful,
yeah,
and really helpful to hear that the arrival doesn't happen. It's
yeah.
just an ongoing kind of process of understanding and growth,
Yeah, it's kind of
as it were.
freeing too if you don't have a set goal that you always have to get to. You're constantly making changes, you're constantly growing and developing and changing. Sort of takes the pressure off, I guess. Then you
Yeah,
don't have to get to a point. You're constantly going forward. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing that I really is kind of relating into that was in a group coaching session I was in. Was although I have to advocate and need to advocate kind of for this equity of access for our
Mhm.
child,
Yeah.
I realized I was trying to fix myself
Mhm.
rather than creating the support mechanisms. It's like if I just do this, if I can just fix that, um, yeah. So that whole kind of journey, pressure off. There is no destination. It's okay. Is really lovely. Is there any kind of footnote, last thing that you would like to share to encourage somebody like me or you who may have had a similar experience in their upbringing?
Hmm. Footnote. Let's see. I think don't be afraid to kind of dig into it. I think that's something that definitely held me back for a while into looking into some of these thoughts and feelings. You're kind of a little afraid of, oh, what am I going to pull out? How does this really actually make me feel? And yeah, but I do think, yeah, lean into it, go for it, learn more about it, and yeah, I think overall it really is helpful just to kind of unpack some things.
Thank you, Hayley. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you being so open about family and exploration and all that advocating you've done. That's just so special for your mum and your siblings. It's really special gift you've given them, really. And thank you for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love what you're doing here. I think it's great. I think if more people hear stories, they'll feel like they're seen and heard.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast. Even the dog has ADHD because apples never fall far from trees. And as we've heard today, it's never just one. Bye for now.